Greetings. I'm Dianne Thomas of Kool 97 FM. Today we're going to be discussing the topic of domestic violence. October is recognized as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It is a time to unite and advocate to end domestic violence in all forms. Today we have an advocate whose efforts in eliminating domestic violence resulted in the establishment of the Jamaica Constabulary Forces, JCF's Domestic Violence Intervention Centers, DVIs. We welcome former Deputy Commissioner of Police, Novelette Grant. Welcome to Kool 97.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so we are going to have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation on this very important topic of domestic violence.
Sure.
And we're looking at the scenario right here in Jamaica. So tell us firstly about your involvement in the establishment of the Domestic Violence Intervention Centers.
I've been doing work in domestic violence prevention and intervention for over 20 odd years. And one of the problems that are challenges that we came across is the kind of safe spaces that victims need to tell their story and to be, treated with the kind of care. They are not just DVI centers, they are called DVI care, C-A-R-E, but there's an acronym there. The idea was that if they have privacy to be able to sit and take their time and tell their stories, because if anybody who knows police stations, they are never designed for that kind of consideration. The force made some effort over the years to have interview rooms, but even so, they can have more than one person in there at a time. So we wanted to have a space where the police officer, who would be the manager or the person on duty there, would be trained to take in complainants and then sit with them in some quiet ways and speak with them. But not only that, where we could ask for assistance from professional members of the community, like persons who are in psychology and psychiatry, and who can provide some kind of therapeutic counseling and so on, to be part of the process, so that, because it's not a problem or an issue that the police alone can deal with, nor are they trained. Police are not trained to deal with the psychosocial needs of people when it comes to this kind of traumatic experience that domestic violence is. So I was stationed at Constant Spring, Area 5 headquarters is there. Okay. And there was an office below, downstairs, where it used to be an old ID parade room. Wasn't being used. And I said, I want to have this transformed, because I've been trying to get this established for decades, and I found the perfect space. And then I approached the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement section of the U.S. Embassy and asked for their help. And they stepped in and helped with the refurbishing and the equipping of the room. I worked with Dr. Patrice Charles to have over 200 station pastors trained in responding to victims of domestic violence. I made contact with the social work department at UWI to say, could you place your graduate students on, call there to help the police with just the interviewing and the care that these persons would require. And one of the things that I wanted to was to be able to reach out to perpetrators, because we focus a lot on the victims, but not enough on the perps. There's so much burden on victims to be the one to do everything, almost, to stop domestic violence. And what we think is the only solution for perpetrators is to lock them up. But when you understand that domestic violence comes from a place of the psychological need to exert power and control over another person, to tell them what to think, how to behave, and how to feel, and how to act, then you recognize that they have other interventions that they need. So we felt that such a space within the constabulary could pull these different groups of persons together to be able to provide a more holistic approach to service to both victims and perpetrators. Not to say we're going to let them off the hook, but part of their journey, hopefully, of changing their behaviors is about taking personal responsibility for their, violent behavior and be willing to go for counseling where it is available and so on as a means of ending the violence.
Wow. Okay, so now what measures were in fact put in place to ensure that the centers would fulfill their objectives?
Well, before I left, the first one was open in 2018.
Was that your center, the one that you were operating from?
The one at Constant Spring. I had left Constant Spring by
then.
Oh, okay. So even though I'd left, I still did it. And then we did one in Matilda's Corner and two in St. Thomas. So we wrote a policy around how the center was to be managed, what the services were to be about. One of the things that I emphasized was that the police, whoever is the initial
point of contact,
yes, shouldn't just pass the person on to the DVI care centers and assume that all the work is going to be left out, because it's usually one or two persons that works there. The criminal investigation will still have to be handled by the person who got the initial report. So that those are some of the things that we emphasize, and that the other support that the person would need, like making referrals, getting in touch with various agencies that could that they themselves would be too frazzled to make that kind of contact, and also you don't want to have people trying to move from point A to point B all over the place. So to try and provide the kind of assistance that would make the people believe that we care. That is why we talk about these centers were supposed to about intervention, counseling, raising awareness not just of the police but the community at large, and of course the kind of response that would be appropriate to the needs of the persons, and of course treat them with empathy, because the part and parcel of the challenge we have as a society is the limited display of empathy when people are suffering. We blame them, and it's just not just about anything. We blame people, and we find it very easy to be dismissive of their suffering. And unfortunately, it does happen in the police force too. We can't deny that. And this is the idea behind why we push that, and we insist on continuous training and exposure for persons who work there, so that they don't fall back into the old habits of not treating people well.
Yes, because you have to recognize that the victim is in a fragile state already. So you don't want to do anything to further make them slip psychologically when they go to the police station, perhaps, to make their report. Now, tell us, you've had the advantage of being in the police force for many years, and you have seen firsthand. You've heard the stories of many of these victims of domestic violence. Give us a profile, if you can. We know not everyone is going to fit into this mold, but a profile of the woman who in the majority of cases comes before you, or the male who comes seeking some assistance from the police because of domestic violence.
Right. While there is no typical victim or typical perpetrator, those with more affluent means are least likely to report in a formal way. They seek help otherwise. But for the persons who will come in on any given day at the guard room, they are usually women with children. They could be married or unmarried. Some may have what we would call professional jobs. Yes, they could be in a middle class job, if you could call it that, working with the government, for example, maybe working in a bank or something. But invariably, though, there are low-income earners. Those are the ones who tend to turn up the most. Low-income earners where the job security is not necessarily all that great, the earnings very low, so they have financial dependency, housing instability because they might not own a house, you know, and they will be from a number of years been putting up with this pattern of abuse. And usually when they turn up at the station, they don't turn up because it's the first incident. You will find, and it fits what I read in the literature about what happens other places across the world, where they say that, you know, it is likely that they will suffer battering maybe 30 odd times before they actually seek law enforcement. It's an average, right? So they take a while because people go into denial. And when it gets to, they will be telling family members, or they will be telling friends, and people will try to say, well, what did you do? So the first thing that people tend to respond to them with, you must have done something. So it's your fault. So these women will go into denial and they will tell you how long they've been suffering. Some are fairly young, but I've also seen persons who are, you know, have a number of years under their belt. And there's always this idea that they have to please somebody. It's all about this business of being submissive and you're not doing what I want. In some cases, I made an investment in you. In some cases, these women have left the relationship and they are stalked and violence inflicted on them because they have left. So but usually anything over 20, 30, you know, it was not unusual to go to a police station in the night and see a woman there sitting with 1 or 2 children or sometimes more because they ran away from the beating, run to the station with the children with them, and have to sit there all night without any place to go because we don't have enough places. And you see that the same profile, you know, 20s, 30s usually, with young children basically, and the dependency. I can't manage on my own income. I can't, my job, I don't have job security. And family members can't help because they are already overloaded. They have the same kind of profile like myself, in other words.
So is that some of the points that you've raised, do those also apply to men, the victims of domestic violence?
The men,
where they're dependent, say, on the female to provide them with financial stability?
Unfortunately, men are not coming forward enough to report their own experience of abuse at the hands of women. And the same-sex couples don't want to because of the stigma that goes with their lifestyle and how they're treated. So you don't find a lot of men who will come and say, I am being abused. You will get them nowadays. I think they're starting to want to come forward and talk about the verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse that they face. And yeah, and some of them may even get physical violence, but they're not as willing because there's a stigma. The idea that you are a big, strong man allowing a woman to beat you up, there is something worrisome about that for men to want to look at another man and tell them that is what I'm experiencing.
Yes.
And I think it is even more distressing for them to tell a woman that. So coming to the police station to make those reports are not, those reports are not easily made. But we have seen, I have seen though where we get men who, when we talk to them about their abusive behaviors, some of them are willing to consider and get the help that they need. Understand that they are using violence to solve problems, conflicts, not the usual conflicts that you could go for kind of mediation, but deep-seated conflict around the idea of powerful, the power and the control thing. I am the man and I am the head of the house. What I say goes. So there's a kind of a mindset around abusers that if you don't address that and if they are not willing to accept that, you get nowhere. The women now, they undergo pressure from bystanders, and bystanders here, not casual ones, family members and friends, who will say, but he's such a nice man. What you gonna do if you leave him? And it reinforces what the abuser says. Because who else do you think will want you? Nobody else but me will want you. So there's a game there, a psychological game, where they really undermine the esteem and belief in self of the victims, and it is unfortunately reinforced sometimes by bystanders.
And bystanders who you thought would be in your corner.
Yes, yeah. So it's a complex thing, but the reality is that the women of working age and who are parents, they are the ones who are more likely to come. The other persons, they will make phone calls, they will tell you their problems, but they don't want to engage fully. So luckily these days we have the Bureau of Gender Affairs with hotlines where we can say, call the hotlines. Some of them go to the DVI care center, but yeah, it's a complex situation for people to deal with.
Wow. Now, we've already touched on a few of the barriers that stand in the way of individuals seeking, whether it's redress, immediate help. What is it that whether the public can do, the government can do? What do you see immediately? And let's segregate the JCF from the government of Jamaica. What can we do to attack head-on the issue of gender-based violence?
I think we have to come up with a comprehensive plan. You know, you will hear about policy documents being written and so on, but what about the implementation of concrete steps on the ground? For example, most victims don't have a proper support structure in place provided by the state for them to get help. One of the things that, for example, where women want to pursue prosecution, if they go for criminal prosecution for the physical battering or the destruction of their property, they have to go to criminal court. If they want to get protection order or occupation order, if they were living together, the occupation order is where you apply for the court to give a temporary order to get them out of the whole residence for a while until the case is heard. Or if you're not living together, a protection order, they stay away from you. When you're living together, you get both. When you're not living together, it's just a protection order. So what you have happening there, it becomes distressing for them to find a different day from work to go to criminal court and then to go for the protection order at the family court, because even when they're out in the parishes, you know, there's a criminal court day for woundings and whatever else they may have done, and then you go to the family court for the orders. They find that distressing because it costs money. There are childcare issues. So people, and then you have people in their ears kind of discouraging them rather than supporting them. And I don't know how many of us are aware that our people are not very comfortable dealing with formal systems. It sounds funny, but it is true. They are intimidated by the formal processes. A lot of people are, quote unquote, afraid of police even though they have done nothing. Just the idea of getting into a police station and they shake. And then to go to court is another, it's not a world that they are used to. They have no idea of how the court works. And so they go there and they're in fear and trembling. And on top of it, they have to apply for the orders themselves. So they have to go to the court's office. Because even though the law says that a constable can apply on behalf of victims, police have reported to me while I was in the system and since I have left that they have tried to do it, but there is no practice directive from my understanding as to how that should work when it is not the virtual complainant, that is the person who's being battered, who comes and make the application. So there's a lot of burden being placed on the victim in many, many ways. It's a victim that must do the safety planning. It's a victim that must find a way to keep themselves safe. You know, monitor your surroundings, ensure you're not followed. So some of the ways that other countries have dealt with this is they have created what is almost like an omnibus service. One facility where when you go there, you report it to the police, and right on the same premises, you have the family court, the domestic violence court. They don't call it family court in some jurisdiction. They have a dedicated domestic violence court. So you can go there and get your orders. You have people there to provide psychosocial help. Where children are involved, there are space there for somebody to give them some kind of therapeutic counseling to work with what they see and probably experience themselves. And so, and there is a space there for people to get a little shelter.
It's like a safe house.
Yes, temporary. They're not going there forever. But, you know, so right there, all your needs are taken care of in one stop. Now, that kind of environment, it motivates people to want to engage with the system a lot more than, you know, I am the only person, I have no support with me, there's no family member, there's nobody, and I have to run the gauntlet of going through all these formal processes. So it becomes very difficult. So that is why we've been doing the work, you know, we do these workshops to encourage community members and family members to educate them, to bring them some awareness of how do you talk to people who have experienced domestic violence. What are the things you should say to them? How you should lend support. And where possible, we encourage people where you can, accompany them to the police station, be with them there as support. When they need to go to court, be there. One of the ways that the society can really step up, we have hundreds of people, I think, that goes through social work programs at the universities. How do we get them more involved, specifically to look at the whole business of family violence? Because while we're here talking about intimate partner violence, domestic violence is not just quote unquote man and woman in an intimate relation. You have to think about the old people who family members beat them up, elder abuse. The children within the context of a domestic violence situation where the parents are feuding and beating up and abusing one parent doing it to the other. The child is witnessing that.
Yes.
And the child may very well find themselves becoming the victim. A child in a house where there is domestic violence is also likely to suffer sexual violence from the perpetrator, you know, as opposed to a child who is not living with that. So again, how do we treat with the children who are witnessing, and potential victims? What about the vulnerable people in the homes who are mentally and physically incapacitated? So there's a whole range of persons, and so I would love to see, you know, dedicated social workers in communities at some and this is where the omnibus situation would come in. We talk about money and that it would be costly to do that, but it costs more to deal with the fallout of domestic violence, and we would be better off in the long run. But I would love to see those persons available to be able to assist and work with families and the kids and work with schools and help with some of the education and awareness raising that is required. It's those kind of systems that I would really love to see in Jamaica. I've seen it work elsewhere.
As an aside, right now you're in an interview with Kool 97 FM, and for those who are just joining us, we're speaking with former Deputy Commissioner of Police, Novelette Grant. Media houses.
Right.
Media houses are in a position to change the tide.
Yes.
You have this platform to not just address Kool 97 FM as a radio station,
Yes.
but this is going to go worldwide. This is other stations will be able to view this. You'll probably get opportunities elsewhere. But speak specifically to how can the media, or what do you believe is the responsibility of the media in addressing domestic violence or limiting, whether it is content
Yes.
that carries messages of domestic violence that are destructive to our society.
Okay, one of the things that Jamaican media, within the media landscape of Jamaica, I've always heard the idea of we are here to educate and entertain.
And inform.
And inform. So from the perspective of education and information, I would think I would welcome all the media houses and persons within that fraternity to really come together and figure out how can we structure programs that goes for 24/7, 365, not just when it is the domestic violence month. But I would love to see the media bosses sit down and figure out what kind of education programs and information programs can we put forward to the Jamaican people where they understand their rights. For example, people need to know what are the remedies by law. What should you expect when you go to a police station? What should you expect from the court? Because this is the law. What are some of the things you should be educating your children about, our young boys, our young girls? Some of the content that pass for entertainment in Jamaica reinforces negative beliefs and attitudes around relationships between men and women. And we have a responsibility to ourselves to question the efficacy of those messages. What are they sending? When we work with teens in school and we talk to them about teen dating violence and certain behaviors, and then when you hear who they hold up as role models, it's not surprising. And while the media is not the only source from which they get exposed to, you know, some of these messages, the media is still powerful. The formal media, that is still powerful and can do a lot where public education is concerned. Televisions can dedicate a 15 minutes. They can ask their sponsors. Radios can do that. Radio stations can do that, so that we have an ongoing conversation to delve into the complexities of this problem, because it is different from community violence, violence in the street.
Yes.
Violence in the street is between strangers and acquaintances, and you have your home as your refuge that you run home to, where your family members will support you and up in arms that this happened to you. But when the danger is in the house, the United Nations did a report that says the home is the most dangerous place for women. So where do you turn to when your home is the most dangerous place for you? So I would encourage media houses to, I am willing to come and speak to you. If you want, invite me. I'm available. And it's not just Novelette Grant alone. There are a number of us who are advocates, and we can sit down and figure out a way. How do we, as a service to our listeners, our viewers, the people that we depend on to keep our business going, what can we give back to them that is meaningful, that can help with sustainable development? Because one of the things that we talk about is Vision 2030 and all of that. But if we don't have high levels of human capital development, if we don't have a society where we respect the rights of others, where we respect the idea that everybody should live free from fear, especially at home, if we don't have a society where we encourage people to have good relationship within their house and in their community, then we are going to be, you know, just going incrementally with this really big problem and not making any progress in a way that is going to be noticeable, right? So, because when I started the DVI care centers, it is not the most ideal form of facility or response framework, let me put it this way, for dealing with this problem. But within the scope of what I could do and where I could leverage support, it's better than what we had before.
You had to start with something.
You had to start with something. So we shouldn't then believe that the DVI care centers is the be all and end all. You know, so if the media give us platform to help advocate and to start to highlight the pros and cons, talk about what people experience in the help seeking process, talk about the community attitudes and values and beliefs that reinforce, you know, some of the behaviors that lead to violence against women, and then connect the dots for the society to see how violence in the home end up influencing community violence, violence in schools, violence in the workplace, you know, and so on.
Violence in entertainment forms.
In entertainment forms. If we don't get that kind of conversation going and keep it going, and have the patience to see the payoff, not to think that this is an overnight thing, then we won't get anywhere. So I am here. She asked, I responded. Media houses, Dianne asked, I can bring an army of people to come and talk. Just give us the time and the space.
Okay.
We'll come and do it.
Who knows? Kool 97 FM might very well lead that charge.
Well, you are cool for many reasons.
For a reason.
For a reason. You're the coolest station.
Now, you mentioned earlier the fact that you have victims who are living in the same household with the perpetrator.
Yes.
What reason, within reason,
Yeah.
what can they do to get away from the toxic situation?
Wow. Yeah, it's very tough. Prevention is always better than cure. So let me start there. Usually when people are getting into relationships, there's always warning signs. But because people don't know what they are, they get involved with these persons.
The rose-colored glasses,
yes,
kind
yes.
of.
You know, we call, you know, the Prince Charming kind of thing. But once you get in, you start to get in the relationship, the warning signs become bigger and louder. You can see them and hear them. Unfortunately, it is when the thing becomes overbearing that people want to get out. And that becomes even more difficult at that stage. So one of the things that we educate people on is you have to have a safety plan. Part of what you need to start to do is to figure out who are your safe persons, trusted people that you could go to, who would protect you, where could you go if you leave. And because you might have to run
with the very clothes on your back.
I remember a lady called and it was her anniversary. And the house that they were living in was built on the land of the husband. The father had gifted them the land. Okay. Father died and now he was being an abusive man to her. And the first thing I said to her, he was there the day, is he sleeping? Where is he? She said he's sleeping. I said, did he use drugs? Yes. It exacerbates the situation. It's not a reason for it. There's a link, but it is not the cause. And I said, where are your important documents? Birth certificates for yourself and your children, your bank book, your ID, your passport. Those are documents if you are living in with an abuser. You have to find a confidential person to keep them. Because one of the first things they tend to hold on to are your important documents. So you have no way of moving and going very far, you know, without those kind of identification documents. We always encourage women, you have to have even a bus fare. People in Jamaica will tell people going on date, have your vex money. Well, guess what? You need to have survival money if you find yourself in a difficult situation, because you might need it to pay a fare to go somewhere, even to the police station. Know your local police station number. Know that telephone number. Put it in your phone, but you don't have to put it as a police station. Disguise it, because some of these people insist on getting in your phone and searching it. And so these are some of the things you have to do. Where you work, if you have a good human resource manager, forget the shame. It's not your fault. It's one of the things that women need to realize. No matter what the abuser tells you, it's not your fault. That is gaslighting when he tells you that. It's not your fault. So go to your human resource manager or somebody you can trust in the workplace to say, this is my situation, I need help. If you go to a church, you know the persons in the church that you can go to. Speak to somebody and say, I need help. Because if you don't do that, it becomes even more difficult. When you need to, if you have a neighbor that you are friendly with and that you think is supportive, you can develop a kind of a signal situation between yourself and that neighbor to say, if you hear me bawling out and saying so, you know that there's problem at the house. Call the police. Call 119 if you're in the corporate area. Call the DVI care center number. Call the Bureau of Gender Affairs. These are numbers that people need to get and access. Save them, keep them, and ensure that you can call them. It's not very easy to really escape, but you have to pick your moment to leave. And if you are in the house and you have a domestic violence event going on, an incident going on, try and avoid being trapped in a bathroom, one way in, one way out. That's dangerous. If you can avoid being in the kitchen where there are weapons, don't be in there. Anywhere where there could be something that could be used to harm you, try and avoid that. So these are some of the things that you know you have to start to think about it. How am I going to escape? When is the best time? Where am I going to go? So you have to figure that out. And one of the things that you have to do, and you know, is figure out what kind of coping skills do I possess? Do I have any? If I don't have any, who am I going to rely on?
Yes.
And as I said, thank God, Bureau of Gender Affairs now, they have hotline numbers that you can call, and you know, hopefully you can get some kind of assistance there. But it's not going to be very easy. And if you plan to leave and you found somewhere else, do not do it by yourself. Ask the police for assistance. And if they are telling you that they can't come, don't take no one policeman's or woman's no. It's over 14,000 police officers. Take your courage in your hand to save your life. You want to survive, and then you want to thrive thereafter. Find the superintendent's office. Find somebody to help you. Don't give up with talking about your life. Don't stop knocking on doors until somebody helps you. And somebody will help. But it's not very easy, and we understand that. I have witnessed it around me, and I have seen it happening to people that I know and people who have reported to me. And I know it's not easy. I can't fathom it. I can only tell you what I've experienced. And based on, in terms of being the person who tried to help, that is not easy. And one of the things too, when you go to make reports to police, if you have children, it's not always easy to remember everything immediately, but tell them about the children, tell them what happens in the house where the children are concerned. And the people who are discouraging you, please don't listen to them. Find those who will support you. That is why I continuously go around Jamaica and run workshops to bring this kind of education and awareness to people, to encourage them to stop blaming people, stop shaming people, and figure out how you can be of support to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's go to what victims can do beyond the arrest of the perpetrators. So they come to the centers, and there's a whole, is this a case where they're going to come up against a whole slew of paperwork? They're literally giving them a file of forms for them to complete?
No. Once you get there, what you hear talk about the empathy, DVI care, empathy, the response. So the police who receive the complainant should seek to put that person at ease. Because the person might come in very agitated. So you reassure and get them to a place of calm, to the point where they can then think and speak about their experience. If they need medical help, obviously,
yes,
you move immediately. The police is to move immediately where that is concerned. Just ensure that you get the medical help. But for the interviewing process, it is you telling your story of your experience of what happened to you, where the police is to document it in a statement. Now, the statement might not be done in one sitting. Oh. We always tell people, police that, because you might get a statement today, you know, it's post-incident and it's almost immediate. But when you go back and you think about the experience, if you find yourself, well, hopefully in a safe space, you might remember some of the things that was done. You should, you know, the police should reassure you to say, you can come back, and they'll take a further statement from you. Of course, the police will advise you about where you can get help outside of the arrest process, because you're going to need that trauma, you know, the help with the trauma, the counseling and the support and so on. And they will tell you what your options are under the law. Obviously, nobody can force a victim to carry through post-arrest. The police can arrest the person, and the victim will say, I don't want to go to court. And it's not because they are frivolous. It is because of the very barriers that we talk about, the housing instability, the financial dependency, and the lack of support, the child care issue, the job issue. And they have to think about it. But when he gets bail, he's going to come back to the same house. I have nowhere to go. And they think about it, and they will make the report to you, to the police. The police should work, the officers should work with that victim's circumstance as best as they can. That doesn't mean that even though the victim is saying, I don't want to pursue a case in court, that the police shouldn't go to that perpetrator and sit that perpetrator down and explain the consequences of what they are doing and what the law provides, and make a note of it, all the official documents. So the victim doesn't really have any forms to fill out. It's the police that does the paperwork. They just sit and tell their story. And there's a way of interviewing these persons so you don't re-traumatize them.
Okay.
And of course, when you go to to find the perpetrator, there's an approach again that the police should take to ensure that, again, they don't put the victim in danger. One of the things, anybody out there listening to me, never allow yourself to be interviewed with the abuser. Because, it should never happen. An abuser and a victim cannot sit in the same space to be interviewed by the police, because one, they intimidate you right there in front of the police. It happened to me at a senior level. Victim is in my office, the perpetrator walks in, and he sits in the chair. We're not sure, I watched him, and his demeanor was, he was trying to gaslight me. Actually, he was doing two things. He was both grooming and gaslighting me, because those are tactics that abusers use. They groom people to believe that the family and friends, that they are the nice person who has to be putting up with so much from this person. Yes. And this guy was doing all of that and trying to say, and we're going to for counseling and everything is good. But I was watching his eyes and I was watching his body language, and I allowed him to talk, and he's good. Oh, he's very good. Trust me, very good. He's a serious narcissist. He was very good that way. Wow. And I allowed him to talk, and then he talked and he talked, and then I said, by the way, go to the senior superintendent. He's the one who wants you. And I got him out of my office. No, everything nice and polite and whatnot. When he left, the dam broke, and that was when the lady told us all that he was doing to her and her son, who was not his son, right? So he was, he was one of the most cruel perpetrator that I ever saw. Wow. I said his eyes were scary. They were dead. He was sitting across from me. he was a scary man. And I said some things to the lady that I won't say on air about the type of person that I think he was and how dangerous he was, and she confirmed that and more.
Wow.
So I read him right. So, you know, if I were an inexperienced person, what he said, I would have believed him.
Yes.
And I would have said, oh yes, he's making amends and he's taking steps to accept responsibility and changing his behavior. He was doing none of that. He was trying to play me.
And the unfortunate thing is that the average individual does not have that kind of training to be able to detect.
Yes, yes, yes. That's
whether
true.
it be male or female, they
that's
don't
true.
have
True.
that. So
Well,
the additional insight that you would have got in your years of training,
yes,
certainly put you in a position to be one who can help.
Yes, yes.
Now, males versus females.
Yes.
Adam versus Eve.
Yes.
Are male victims of domestic violence treated equitably under the law or far less?
All right. The law, that's why they changed it from the Women's Bureau to Bureau of Gender Affairs. That in itself is an indication that there's no distinction. Where we tend to have problem is attitudinal issues around the idea, not like if you go for help in any of, it's how the persons there may very well look at a male who is being beaten up by a woman.
Yes.
You can't deny that there's still that kind of behavior. We have come a long way, I must tell you, and at the DVI care centers, from everything that I kind of keep my ears open to a large extent. They are not doing that because men are telling them about their abuse that they are suffering. But the dilemma that we have, our laws, there's no provision made for people in same sex relationship. It doesn't mean they can't go to the police and report physical and whatever other battering that they may have experienced. But when it comes to applying for protective orders, like whether the occupation or protection order, because I've asked people, who, you know, legal officers and so on, what should people do? And they really have no answers because this relationship is not recognized by law. It's going to be difficult for people within same-sex relationship to apply for those orders. When I do presentations to people from everywhere, church groups by themselves, and multidisciplinary group of persons when I run workshop, and I always try to point out, it is not about a moral issue here. It is the right of citizens to get protection under the law and to be supported. We can't want to reduce violent crimes. We can't want to reduce murders. And then we condemn people because they make choices that we don't agree with. So this is something that as a society, we have to learn to kind of separate our own personal views from doing right by the members of our society, even if the choices they make are not the ones that we would make for ourselves. Has nothing to do with me or lifestyle, but what it has to do is that this is a crime, this is human rights abuse, and you need protection. And so we should not treat people in a way that they are afraid to come forward and seek help. Because when they are afraid to come forward and seek help, guess what they do? Self-help. And self-help is dangerous in Jamaica. Because it means that the violence is going to continue. So we have those situations.
So they will take things into their own hands at that point, and that's when we have a totally new situation for the police to deal with.
And the community.
Yes.
There's a huge cost to domestic violence, you know.
I know.
Huge, that we don't really think about because there is social costs and then there are economic costs. So the social cost, the impact on children, their development, what happens to them emotionally, what happens to them psychologically, how are they able to learn when they are being exposed to violence and so on. We have to think about that. and how they end up becoming bullies at school. Because when they witness,
they're acting out.
Yes, when they witness the violence at home or experience it, they go and they are bullies at school. We have too many reports of teens. They are in relationship and they are doing the exact thing to their teen partners that the adults in their lives and their communities do. And they will defend it. I remember some, running a youth empowerment program that I used to run when I was in the system. And the boys let me know, Miss, when a woman do A, B, C, D, are you telling us that she not get beaten? And they justify it. And I could hear the community voices coming out in what they were saying. We give them role plays and we get them to change their views and they start to think about it differently. But these are huge costs.
Yes.
And so the violence that we are lamenting in school, it began somewhere. When you connect the dots, youth gang, school-based youth gangs. Again, they are coming more often than not from abusive backgrounds. And then, so you have all of that and more. Then the healthcare services. Years and years ago, when I was at UW, we were doing a criminology course. And we went and did a survey at K-Page on a weekend, a whole group of us. And when we went on the male ward, almost everybody there was there because of some form of violence. And they were young, no geriatrics. When we sat in casualty for the 2 days, one person came in with a motorcycle accident. Everybody else who came in for that weekend was violence. I suspect that's long ago, but I suspect that it's likely to be almost the same today as I did. So our resources that for healthcare, how much of it is going towards violence, treating violence, the trauma of violence, workplace. When I came in earlier, I was telling you about somebody today at work who her spouse decided that you're not going to work today and wouldn't allow her to talk to her workplace. Luckily, they persisted in calling her and the supervisor got him to talk. And his idea is, I have invested in her and she can't just leave me as she please, right? Because I own her kind of thing. But what is the cost to that workplace?
Yes.
We have people who are entering in our workplace coming in very traumatized with complex post-traumatic stress disorder because of domestic violence, because it's an ongoing problem. Can't perform as they should, need to take time off to go for health care, to go to the courts when they engage the judicial system. I mean, when you think about the cost, I think the World Bank says that on average across the world, violence against women is probably between 1 to 3% of GDP. Don't quote me, I have it somewhere, but I'm not going to hunt for it on the paper. But it is that costly in terms of GDP. A few years ago, I saw something that in Jamaica, what they look at domestic violence, violence against women, and it was more than what was allocated in the budget for the Ministry of Health. The cost. That was 2014. So it's very costly. And we need to start to understand why it is everybody's business. It's not just the victims, it's not just the perpetrators, it's not just the police. Everybody needs to start to realize we all pay the cost.
But how can we change the psyche of males, females, whether them now as adults or the generation to follow? We're looking at the ones younger than ourselves.
Yes.
How can we change their psyche so that they value their self-worth, they have self-esteem, their psyche is well adjusted? What can we do? Because some might argue that what we're reaping now is a retention from what we endured from the slave masters, and that we came from the most violent set of Africans that crossed the transatlantic trade. But it has to stop somewhere. How can we adjust now?
We have to be intentional about what it is that we want people to learn that will help them to grow up to be the kind of adults that we want in the society. So we have a very captive audience in the schools, you know. Tell her that we were working with youth,
yes,
and their attitude, and we work with them, and they made 360-degree turn. Nothing that when they told us about some of the changes that they were going to make, we were surprised. And not only did they say it, they did it, right? So it is not as difficult as we may think to reach many of our young people. They need people to talk to. They need people to listen to them and to provide the kind of guidance that they need. They need training and education in core life skills, problem solving, conflict management, you know, things like that. So if we are intentional about educating our young people in a deliberate way around certain behaviors and attitudes and so on, we can see changes in really short order. And a lot of adults out there are also receptive to being educated, because in the workshops that we've been doing, when you hear the testimonials from the participants, we call them there as persons who we think are what we call frontline responders, because they come from police, church, justices of the peace, schools, you name it. They come from almost all the spheres you can think of. And yet people will tell you, this is what I endured when I was a child. I went through this. Because and then they talk about, now I understand. Now I know what I need to do. We give people tools that they take home. Once they have use it for themselves to assess themselves, they take it home and they, you know, administer it to their family members, and they will sit down and say, oh, we never see this abuse, because we sometimes only focus on the physical form of abuse, and we don't pay enough attention to the non-physical.
Yes.
And so start people recognize how dangerous the non-physical
just
is,
as dangerous,
if not worse.
More,
it is often worse. And so we can educate people, but it has to be continuous. It can't be, we are doing something, but we don't have the means. And my group is not the only group that does workshops, but we need more investment in educating people for prevention. And it can be done. Lots of people are out there doing a lot of things, but we all are in a very precarious financial position. When it comes, we get a little stipend. I thank the Minister Grange and the Bureau of Gender Affairs for supporting what we do, because without her support and the Bureau's support, we couldn't do what we do. But the reward is when you hear people talk about how aware they are now and the things that they're going to do differently in their lives. I remember one of the most rewarding things for me was when we went to St. Thomas and they invited a member of the public who deals with public transportation.
Okay.
Oh my God. That was great to see, because they see a lot of abuse.
Oh.
You know,
transporting the victims
and people, and some of the people who provide public transport also, you know, they perpetrate too, because we get reports along that line. And he went home. People came back writing out what the training meant, the awareness that they have, how they're going to implement certain things in their own families, and then what they're going to do with their friends and colleagues. And that man was a beacon in terms of how he saw it. So we mustn't give up on the older generation and think that they are unreachable. They are reachable, but they lack knowledge. Right? I remember a man that the lady came and made a report against him for abusing her. She had left him and he stalked her, and they end up in a tussle. When we went for him and locked him up, when she looked at him, she changed her mind. She was in the middle of giving her statement. She changed her mind, her right. But I said to her, you have to finish giving the statement and then give another one, giving your reasons for withdrawing. Okay. We let him go. After she did that, I had a chat with the man and I explained to him what he was doing, how wrong it was, and what it could mean for both of them. Somebody could end up in the cemetery, somebody end up in prison. Oh, 3 months or so later, turned up. I see this gentleman at my door, say, hey, how may I help you? Come to tell you thanks. And I'm kind of like, I don't know you. You know, because I didn't remember him. And yes. it felt so funny. And I'm saying, tell me thanks. It kind of sounded cuckoo to me. And he said, you don't remember me, miss? I said, no. He said, and then he reminded me of the incident. And I said, oh, it's a lady that you should tell thanks. Because if it were up to me, you'd still be in lockup. He said, no, miss, it's not that part I want to tell you thanks about. You know, I said, what then? You see how you explained it to me. I went home and I thought about what you said. And I realized shouldn't be doing what I was doing. The woman says she's done, I should accept it. Not a very educated man.
Oh.
And yet, he got it. So people can be reached. We just need to be intentional and do it on a continuous basis within a context where we know we are reaching communities and groups and individuals and so on, from young to old. You're not going to get everybody. It don't work that way. But we can get enough people that they can begin to raise their families, their children better. Yes. Stop with the abuse, stop with the neglect, and we can see a better set of behavior in students in our schools. And we can see less conflict amongst that age group, and hopefully it can deter them from wanting to use violence to solve all problems, because unfortunately that is what is out there in the communities, that this is the way you solve problems, this is the way you deal with conflict. So we can educate our people to move away from that.
There's a topic that you touched on more than once in your discussion, and that's the matter of stalking.
Yes.
Which somehow we're hearing more and more of cases of stalking. How can an individual recognize that they're being stalked? What are the warning signs?
All right. Stalking can happen for domestic violence victims, and it can happen to you and I, because a person gets obsessed with you. They hear you on the radio, Dianne, and they just love your voice. And they start to send you gifts. It's a serious thing, you know. People do that. They become obsessed with people and believe that you belong to them. They own you. They might unwanted gifts coming around where you are, just wanting to be with you, trying to find out where you live. And in some cases, they might follow you and so on. And they're always, that is a big no-no, right? You shouldn't. It's harassment, sexual stalking, sexual harassment, stalking, and that with a victim of domestic violence and a person who you have, well, you want to leave them, even when you live in the house, they could be watching you. So they can plant stuff in your telephone, your device, clone your phone, monitor your calls, set up all kind of electronic devices around your house. If you have cars, they can put stuff on your car to be able to track you, to know where you are. So those are things you have to listen to when they talk about where you were. They will turn up at your workplace consistently, asking where you are, finding out from your friends and co-workers where you are. So when you have that, is a form of control. And when they start to follow you around, like if you get a protection order, or if these are behaviors that would make you need to get a protection order, where you go to school, they're there, where you go to church, they're there, where you go to socialize, they're there. Everywhere they are, and they are insisting that you come back to them, and they're not leaving you alone. You get the phone calls, the consistent, persistent phone calls, you know, the messages, all of those things. Gifts that you don't want because you don't want to be in any kind of contact with them. So those are things you can look out for. And we have, and some of us, we like to post too much on social media, especially when we are in these kind of precarious situations with locations, talking about where we are, what we're doing. You have to be careful. And you have to get people to check your phones, check your vehicles, and so on, to ensure that there's no Trojan anywhere in any of your device, that so people can track you. Because they do that. They turn up. And the other thing, where children are concerned, they can spy on you using devices that your children have. Yes, they will plant whatever tracking app or whatever they need to put on your phone, and you don't know, because especially when the children, there's a kind of custody arrangement where they have to go with the easy way. Or here is another thing that I found that perpetrators in Jamaica are learning, because when we do this kind of education, they also learn too. Can't stop them. It's a long-standing thing, but I never used to see it happen in Jamaica. We know of it happening in other jurisdictions where they use the justice system for their benefit. That is,
how
they are the batterer, the abuser. But when they realize you're about to leave, they go first and apply for custody of the child. And because some of these women, unfortunately, did not take any step to report or to do anything, they make a story that makes you, the unfit parents, to get the system to be sympathetic to them. And they have used it. I remember getting a call about a particular case. This woman was beaten up by her boyfriend, who pounded about 2 or so pregnancies out of her. Because one of the things with these possessive guys who are abusers, once a woman gets pregnant, they become jealous of the fact that this child is going to come and take away attention from me. So they go for the stomach and they don't stop till you get a miscarriage. It's just one of the cases, but he beat her up so badly she lost 2 pregnancies. The third one came to term. She had the baby. She managed to escape and went to live outside of the corporate area. And he went and I can't remember which other agency, but he went with a story, and that she stole his child and he can't get access. And then he went to the police with support from that agency to find the girl, and he found them.
Oh no.
And then my colleagues called me, tell me about the situation. And when we check out this guy, he wasn't a very upstanding citizen. Sometimes they know to game the system, put the woman at risk, because it gives them access to you.
Yes.
That's all they want. Not that they want a child.
I'm hoping that a lot was learned from this conversation that we had with former Deputy Commissioner of Police, Novelette Grant. On behalf of Kool 97 FM, I want to say thank you to you for providing so much insight into the enormity, the depth, the breadth, the length of what domestic violence entails, the services that are available to help the victims, exactly what individuals should be looking out for in relationships that could be warning signs. Now remember, once again, domestic violence is not only something that affects women. It is gender neutral. Males, females are victims of domestic violence. So, if you're aware that a loved one, a member of your community, is in fact undergoing domestic violence, as far as you possibly can, provide them with information where they can get assistance. As far as possible, if you can, take it into your hands and report it do so. Each one has to save one. I need to remind you, October, the month of October, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Thank you once again for being our guest on Kool 97.
Anytime.
And something tells me you'll be hearing from Kool 97 FM as we take you up on some of the charges that you have put out there for someone to be brave enough to take on. Thanks again.
You're most welcome. Thank you, everybody, for listening.